record this. And I would ask that you all mute if you can while Carol speaks, and then she'll have some time at the end, obviously to take any questions. And you can put those in the chat or obviously come off mute. So I'd like to introduce Carol Hamilton with ALS TDI. She is their Senior Vice President of Development. And ALS TDI has been working now for over 25 years, right? 26 in April, it looks like, to advance critical research into ALS. And Carol, please take it away.
Good afternoon, barely, everybody. Most of you I know. Ben, I'm happy to be getting to know you. I am going to share my slides and we will go from there. And look at that, it even showed up on the first one. One really cool thing about my slides is all of the people that you will see are not actors. They are real scientists that work for the ALS Therapy Development Institute. That is Anna Gill, working on some cell biology work. So hold on, let's see if I can get this to advance. One second. Hope you guys like this slide because apparently this is all I can do. There we go. So ALS TDI, the ALS Therapy Development Institute, has a very simple mission, and it is to discover and develop treatments for ALS as quickly as possible until everyone with ALS has an effective treatment. So, we know that this is a heterogeneity. There's a lot of heterogeneity in this disease, and it's not going to be one pill cures all. We see treatments like Qalsody from Biogen treating SOD1 ALS. So that is a treatment that is highly effective for a small group of people. And then we will have treatments like we thought the Amylyx drug was that could be minimally effective for a broader group of people. We are going to keep going until all of those squares are filled and there is something for everyone to try. So a little bit about ALS TDI. You are right. We were founded in 1999. So we were founded by a family, which, while we are the largest ALS research institute in the world, that sounds kind of antiseptic and scary, right? An ivory tower and unapproachable. Well, I think there are a lot of people on this call that could tell you it's kind of not how we operate. And I think it stems from our beginnings. On the left in the picture there, you see Stephen Haywood in the orange shirt in the back, who was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 29. And his family, most of them are MIT trained engineers. His dad is still a professor emeritus of mechanical engineering at MIT, his brothers. So when Stephen was diagnosed, his family kind of said, okay, whose job is it to solve this problem? Because I want to call them and tell them to hurry the heck up. And they realized that no one had stepped up and taken ownership of developing treatments for ALS. And so they raised their hand and said, okay, we'll take ownership of the problem. There was a lot of bravado. They had no idea then how hard it was going to be. But at least they took ownership. So they started in the basement where you see there. So in the dress is Stephen's mother, Peggy. In the foreground is his sister-in-law, Melinda, and his best friend, Robert Bonazzoli, Robert Bonazzoli in the blue t-shirt there, you guys, just for some fun information. Robert was one of Stephen's two best friends growing up in high school. And Robert left ALS TDI before I got there 20 years ago and became kind of the foremost expert in the Harvard Mass General world of the use of psychedelics in mental health, which I think is fascinating. And as none of you will be surprised by, Robert came to us a couple of years ago and said, my uncle was just diagnosed with ALS. Can you help? Nuts. So from that family basement, Stephen had been renovating and flipping houses out in California before he came back. And he had made some money. And so he said, here's a check for $10,000, get going. So get going has kind of been a bit of a hashtag, even though the term hashtag hadn't been invented at this point. But for us all the way through. It is important to us that every day we think about the fact, sorry, I am a crier and a swearer. Um, we are doing our work with dying
Right,
people's
'cause I
money.
can't hear anything.
So we take it very seriously. People with ALS and families with ALS are up against an awful lot. And so far, to a very large extent, they've been responsible for a lot of the progress that's happened in research. All of us at TDI, for short, look forward to the day where we will say we will no longer accept a dime from anyone living with this disease. Right now, we can't. We got to get it done. So from that family basement with that $10,000 to get going, over on the right, you can see what the labs look like now. And in that blue Oxford cloth shirt with the brown pants, that is Stephen's son, Alex, and his wife, Wendy, and the mom, Peggy, in the blue that you saw in the dress on the other side, and Ken Thompson, who Amy met, who was Stephen's best friend in high school, and delivered his eulogy and has been here every day since Stephen was diagnosed as our vice president of lab operations. So I say all of this to say that those bullet points that you see on this slide, yep, we're pretty freaking awesome. We are the first ever nonprofit biotech, right? We are funded by the community who comes to us and says, instead of like a regular biotech, where if you get a no on a drug, your investors say, okay, we're pulling our money. But you guys, this community says, hurry up and get to the next one. So it's really an efficient model. We're also the largest, most comprehensive drug discovery lab in the world focused on ALS. There are 32 scientists in there every single, 36, I think, actually now, every single solitary day focused solely on ALS. And the third one, we're cheap. All of that is important. Just as important for you to know is that Haywood family, as you see in the pictures there, is still here and is at the heart of who we are. Yup, we are a medical research institute, but we are also comprised of people who have loved ones living with this disease or have lost loved ones living with this disease. So we're not kidding around. This is Andy. Some of my slides have various hairdos of Andy's. I'm not quite sure if these do or not, but you may get to see him with all different styles. We do the preclinical research from the drug development side, right? First, you come up with an idea and you read a publication and you see that a new genetic mutation relevant to ALS has been discovered. Fabulous. But you know what? That's right here. And over there are the people living with ALS who need it. It's our job to get it across that bridge and take those academic and basic science discoveries and turn them into medicines. We're creating the at-bats for clinical research. Before you can test anything in people living with the disease, it goes through cellular models. It goes through fish sometimes. Sometimes it goes through, often goes through mice, sometimes rats. We do all of that work to create the drugs that will then go on to clinical trial. And we're going to keep doing it until we fill in that box like I talked about. This is Dr. Kyle Denton. He is head of our cell biology team. I mean, does he look like he came from central casting for this role or what? He is as brilliant as he is kind. He also is one of the best cyclists we've ever seen. He's part of our Tri-State Trek fundraiser every year, and Kyle is the first one in on the bike. You know, when I was in high school, you used to have to choose between being a nerd and a jock. Apparently, you don't have to do that anymore. Kyle is excelling at both, and nerd is a beloved term for us, by no means an insult. We've tested more than 550 drugs at ALS TDI. We've tested more drugs in animal models of ALS than the rest of the world ever has combined. We have brought drugs forward into clinical trial. There are two drugs right now in clinical advancement. One you see in the second bullet point, tegoprubart, which was invented at ALS TDI. It finished a phase 2 trial very successfully, and they're raising the money to move it forward into a phase 3. There is another drug from a company called Neuroimmune that is in trial in the US and Canada. Sometimes, not only do we come up with our own ideas and invent our own drugs, but sometimes companies will come to us and say, hey, you guys are better at this than we are. We don't know how to run drugs through animal models of ALS. Will you do it for us? And if the scientific rationale is there to do it and eat up some of our bandwidth, then we're obligated to do it, right? Our job is to develop effective treatments. It doesn't matter whose they are. So we will help anybody in the field. And then the third bullet point is something we're going to talk about in a minute, so I'm going to skip it. And the fourth one is to make us sound cool. We work with Google, right? They're pretty cool. But we will collaborate with anyone who has skin in the game and can help advance this field. So in this case, it's something else we'll talk about a little bit when we talk about the ALS Research Collaborative. But basically, that Google are kind of the kings and queens of vocal AI, right? They know how to work with that. Well, we had a lot of voice data and we didn't quite know what to do with it. So we asked Google if they'd help us, and it turned into an incredible partnership that has moved things forward in ALS since. So we'll talk about that as we go through. I'm going to stop for a minute before we get into kind of the two topics that we're going to cover and see if anybody has a question. Okay. So here are the two things we're going to talk about today. How can people with ALS engage with ALS TDI and advance ALS research? First is the Trial Navigator, and the second is the ALS Research Collaborative, or you'll hear me refer to it as ARC, because God forbid in this field if everything didn't have a 3-letter abbreviation, right? So they're both quite different. The ALS Trial Navigator. So when Michelle and I, Michelle Dupree, who works with us at TDI, and I get on calls with families who are newly diagnosed. Hi, Melissa Jakowski. The first question
Hey
we're off.
Carol, how are you?
Hi, so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I actually want to invite you to my event. So can you shoot your email in the chat?
Yeah, put it in there. I'll put, yeah. Michelle, will you put my email in there?
Yes, I'll tell Melissa.
Thank you.
Oh,
You are
thanks,
too
Michelle.
funny.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, Melissa. And Gwen is on.
Hey, Gwen.
Oh, hi, Gwen. It's old
Hi.
Jackie. I love Connecticut. ALS
Yay.
United. You have good people. Okay, so back to what the heck I was talking about.
Sorry.
No, I'm so glad. So, people always ask us, okay, what's the best trial for me to get into? What's the best drug? Well, we need to remember, right, that the whole purpose of a trial, it's an experimental medication. We don't know what's good until the trial reads out. We do have insight when you talk to us, and I offer this to everyone at ALS United to call on us for this. We do have conversations with drug and pharma companies ahead of time before they launch their trials. So we do often have a good understanding of, again, the scientific rationale that's going into a candidate that moves into clinical trial. So always happy to answer the phone and answer questions like that about drugs as they come up into trial. But in the meantime, you know, the answer to the question, what's the best trial for me, is really up to the person entering the trial, right? What may be important to me could be very different than what's important to somebody else. So this is a tool to get at just that, to get tailored recommendations, to choose a list of trials based on your own criteria. So we're going to talk about a couple of different, and here, boom, boom, boom. Oops. Oh, darn it. Why didn't that go back? There's Andrea. You guys were talking about her a minute ago. There's a QR code if you want to hit it with your phone so that you can get right to the Trial Navigator, but just any of us will be able to direct you, and it's on the ALS TDI website at als.net. So there are a couple of different ways you can use this tool. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So the first one is the guided trial finder. So has anyone ever used TurboTax for their taxes? Have you, Amy? I love it because it's nice to me the whole way, right? I'm so freaking scared. I'm so stressed out when I sit down to do it. I'm afraid that somebody's going to come out of the computer and yell at me for being an idiot because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But with TurboTax, it like gives you smiley faces and it holds your hands. It tells you you're beautiful and brilliant and fabulous. And I love that. And that's kind of what you're getting here. Rather than going to clinicaltrials.gov, which kind of yells at you, right? Because it has all kinds of words that you don't understand and you're intimidated through the process and it makes you feel stupid. Well, this one says, you know what? I gotcha. And it holds your hand and it says, okay, Jess, what are the things that are important to you? Tell me about yourself. And you start a little questionnaire. And it might say, how long have you been living with ALS? It may ask you, do you have a genetic mutation that you're aware of? Yes or no, smiling the whole time. It will ask you things like, is it important to you that you don't have to travel too far? Is it important to you that you are in a phase 2 or a phase 3 trial? And then you hesitate for a second. You go, uh-oh, I'm not sure I know the difference between a phase 2 and a phase 3. And it says, don't worry about it. And you hit a little bubble and it explains everything to you the whole way. So you go on a little walk with this guided trial finder. And you can change your answers too. If you say, you know what? So each time you answer a question, it tells you the number of trials it's going to pull up for you at the end, right? Are you a person living with ALS? Yes. Let's say it starts out with 100 trials. Do you have a genetic mutation? Yes, I do. Okay, well, that might take you down to fewer trials. It may not. So if suddenly the way you've answered a question limits the number of trials that it's going to expose you to at the end, you can say, you know what? I'm going to change that answer. I want as many trials as I can. Then at the end, up pops a list of trials based on your criteria. It might be that you want only phase 3s. You want only phase 3s within 30 miles of you. You want only phase 3s within 30 miles that have expanded access programs, which if you don't know what that means, that's okay. It will tell you. And then you're going to say, okay, let me see the list. And up on your screen is going to pop up a PDF with all of your, let's say, 20 trials that you've come up with. And for each one will be a QR code to give you more information on the trial. And what you can do then is a couple of things. You can have conversations with us to help you weed it down further if you want. But most importantly, you are going to, like it says in bolded down at the bottom, bring that list into your clinician and say, hey, I just used the ALS Trial Navigator. This is what it spat out for me. What do you think of these? Can we talk about each one? So that's probably the way that people use it the most. Now, a couple of things to know too. You can create an account in the Trial Navigator so that you can save, it'll house everything for you. And if you want to run it again in a couple of months, because now the answer to your how long have you had ALS question is different, that's great. You can do it again. Something that is also very important for me to make sure everyone knows, we can't see the answers that you got. We protect your privacy in this. Now, if someone registers for the ALS Trial Navigator and they're new to ALS TDI, one of us might reach out and say, hey, do you need any help? But we will also let you know, don't worry, we're not seeing how you answered any of these questions. We're not seeing the list of trials. That is yours and yours alone. But we're always happy to help with it if we can. Any questions on the guided? And you know what? Don't ask me yet. I'm going to go through these other two, and then we'll see what you have for questions. The trial map, I bet you can guess what that is. So it's interactive. You can, again, zoom in, zoom out, depending on where you live and what's important to you. And something really cool about the Trial Finder map is it was developed by a gentleman living with ALS. I don't know if anyone knows the name Pat Dolan. But Pat Dolan's career is whatever the hell you're called when you are a map person. I already forgot. And Pat worked with us. Oops, sorry for the dog, if you hear it. Pat worked with us to develop this interactive map. And all of these are updated all the time. We pull from world registries, not just clinicaltrials.gov in the US. It is international. If you ever see an error or something that is not included that you're aware of, let us know. We're pretty good, but somewhere along the line, we're going to screw up. Help us out. This is a project for all of us together. And the trial browser, you can set your own categories rather than having that guided walk, that TurboTax walk. You can just say, here are the things that I am looking for. And you can come up with a list that way. And again, bring these in, talk to your clinician. Who's got questions on anything around this? Anybody? Okay, great. And all of you guys, all the ALSU CT folks, please, give this to your people. Call one of us and let us know if we can, help you help them at all with it. But it's kind of fun to do. It really is. And remember too, that results will change. Come back in a couple of weeks. Some things are going to open. Have conversations with us about, hey, is there something else coming down the pike in the next month that I should know about? There might be, but it warrants you going back and doing it again, which might be, worth setting that account up, knowing that we're not looking at your data. It's just an account for you.
Step 6.
Hey,
Yeah.
sorry, Carol. I'm chomping on food and trying to talk here. But question, is the trial navigator, is it for observational research as well?
It is. It carries observational trials. It carries EAPs. It carries open label. Yep. So you can look at all of that in here. So if you
Awesome.
are, I think Gwen is getting at, if you may be ineligible for many trials, for whatever reason, perhaps it's how long you've been living with the disease, you may want to search for a way to involve yourself in research that
Yep.
isn't through testing a drug. So it's through an observational trial where people can learn from you. And we're going to kind of talk about that too in a minute. Or it may be for an expanded access program, which I'm just going to quickly define in case there's anyone who doesn't know what that is. But there are an awful lot of people who have become ineligible for many trials, again, possibly due to the duration of the disease. And it seems kind of stinky, right? Like here you are, a rock star living with this disease all this time, and you don't get access to some of the trials that some of the more newly diagnosed people do. An expanded access program is when a drug is made available to people who are outside of the parameters of a trial. They may be given the opportunity to try that drug, and their data will be followed too, so it will be useful. That is an expensive thing to do for sponsors, drug companies running trials. There is some money for it through the Act for ALS. God knows the future of federally funded programs going forward. But it is when there is an actual expanded access program, there will be no cost to the people involved in that. It will either be paid for by the company or through a federal grant.
Yeah. Hey, fast question, Carol, on staying engaged and seeing, as programs change or become expanded. So is the trial navigator AI driven, or do you have to, say you want to review it every 3 months?
Yep.
Do you have to go in and repopulate at the end of 3 months, or on the back end, is the AI looking at what you put in back in December and then bouncing it against what the March or April
Yeah,
criteria might be?
it's pulling from on the back end what is already listed, with updates on it will, the back end will receive updates every, I don't know what the period is, Ben, if it's weekly, whatever it is, from each set of registries. And then it will close down whatever in that update is no longer included, and it will
Okay.
open whatever is new in that update.
Okay, awesome. Thank
And
you.
also you're welcome. Thanks for asking. You can also, you guys, look at, you may want to only look at, which would kind of make sense, currently enrolling trials, right? But trials are listed in there even when they are not currently enrolling. That might be for a couple of reasons. One, they might have just finished, but it's another reason why you want to go back a couple of times, because some trial designs are set up where they're done in cohorts. So they will enroll 20 people at this dose level, then they'll close down for a little while, get that all set up, then they'll open back up for another 20 people at another dose level. I'm making that up, but it's happened. It's done. So there may be a trial that is not currently enrolling today, but it was yesterday and it will be tomorrow. So again, I'm being somewhat cavalier with that, but you get the meaning. Any other trial navigator questions? Okay. This is Andrea P. We were just talking about her. Michelle Dupree and I, Michelle's who's on this call from TDI, and I were supposed to be down, as Gwen knows, in Raleigh, North Carolina, where Andrea is from, to celebrate her 44th birthday. Andrea has been living with ALS for 11 years. And she is probably one of the most robust and profuse providers of ALS real world data of anyone on this planet. And you can see a hint of that by that funky looking bracelet she is wearing. So we are going to talk about how at ALS TDI we can learn from people currently living with this disease and employ what we learn into something that will help us develop drugs, subcategorize this population, uncover biomarkers, learn how to use digital endpoints in clinical trials so that nobody has to go to the clinic to enter a trial, all kinds of things. And it's all thanks to people living with this disease and asymptomatic gene carriers who are providing their data. Andrea was one of the first people in this program that we're going to talk about. And boy, has she provided a lot of information for researchers across the world. So Ben, you've got a lot of information in you that you have keys to this disease, right? You're living with it. But we need to figure out how to extract some of that data and information you have in your body without splaying you open, because your wife's going to be pissed. I don't care if she's in Vermont or not. She is not going to be happy if we splay you open to get that information. So we had to develop tools to learn from you without hurting anybody. And that's what we're doing. Now, we didn't stop there. A couple of years ago, we launched a secondary aspect of this program. Part of the ALS Research Collaborative is collecting data from people living with ALS. And now part of it is sharing that data with the rest of the global research community, anonymized, data protected all the time. Okay. How the heck do we do that? Well, I'll tell you. Okay, so first, if you join the ARC study, you truly become a partner in research. We can't do most of what we do without the help of people with ALS. And that stinks because you guys have a lot on your plate. We talked about that earlier. But you know what? We'd really appreciate your help. Here are some of the things that you can provide in terms of data that will help the research community. Number one, if you join the ARC program, you will get a bunch of surveys to ask you about your clinical scores, your forced vital capacity, your ALS, FRS, all of that stuff, scores that you get from the clinic. When you join the program, you get a proprietary web portal that is yours and yours alone. Now, certainly, excuse me, you can share the login with anybody you want. If you're living with ALS and you enroll in ARC and you're like, you know what, I'm really not all that interested in this, but your daughter is, or your husband or wife is, great, they can do it. But it is your proprietary portal for you and you alone to do with what you want. So in that will go all of the data that you supply to the researchers at ALS TDI, and then after anonymized with researchers around the world. Most importantly, it's shared back with you, right? So constantly we hear from people who say, yeah, I gave blood at, Mass General and I gave hair at Columbia. Cool. What did they do with it? Oh, I have no clue. Nobody ever told me what they did with it. We're going to share all of this data back with you in a way that is useful for people living with ALS and for their clinicians. So we are going to look at your clinical scores. We're going to take all kinds of surveys on your personal backgrounds. Again, I'm going to be cavalier here, but we're going to say, did you happen to live near a Superfund site? Did you drink, mercury with your orange juice every morning as a kid? We want to look at possible environmental exposures. We want to look at occupational risks. We're doing a study for the CDC right now on lifestyle risks in ALS. We want to know if you're a veteran, all kinds of things on your personal background. Then we're going to track your speech. Now, Ben, I got to move my little rectangles here so that I can see you again, because you asked about AI and machine learning. The speech tracking thing goes back to the Google reference that I made a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
So when we first started this program, which was in 2014, by the way, with Ice Bucket Challenge money, and we submitted the idea for this program to the NIH, who told us, no way can you guys pull this off. And we said, nah. Yes, we can. And it's now the longest running and most robust natural history study in ALS. So back to the speech tracking. Sometimes I just have to give us a little plug. I think we're pretty awesome. All of us can hear the difference in the voice, in most cases, of someone diagnosed with ALS today and someone diagnosed with ALS 12 years ago. Dysarthria, right? Most of us can hear it. But how do you track it? How do you quantify it? So we knew that as a symptom of this disease, that tracking voice data was important, but we kind of didn't know what we were going to do with it. In the early days, we had all of these recordings, and we truly had a committee that listened to voice recordings without knowing who the people were and tried to guess how far along with this disease they were. Well, that's pretty unscientific. So that's when we went to Google and we said, can you help us develop an algorithm that quantifies vocal progression? And they did. And it's really done through machine learning, right? Throwing all kinds of data at them. And then really, you've heard people say, I know, I think, Gwen, you might even have a t-shirt that says this. You've heard people refer to the ALS accent, right? I'm not drunk. I have an ALS accent. Kind of. Google used the ALS accent as an accent, like you would French or Spanish. And you crowdsource all of this data, and then you say, okay, tell us how this accent progresses. And they developed an algorithm that tracks speech in ALS, dysarthria. And we have now published papers on it. I think I have a slide of one of them later in this that shows that we're not done refining it yet, but tracking voice progression is a more sensitive measure of disease progression than the ALS-FRS score that's used in the clinic today. So again, remember I talked about digital endpoints and how you can help us actuate those. So imagine if one day you're in a clinical trial and rather than going in to have your blood taken, your doctor says, here, call this 800 number and say, I owe you a yo-yo today, which was the phrase that we used to begin populating this. And that's how they determine if a drug works. It's possible. So everybody who's in this program, which is almost 3,000 people with ALS, is helping us to do that. So that's the speech tracking. We do whole genome sequencing. And again, if you don't want to know, if you might have a genetic mutation, you don't have to look, or you can assign somebody else to look. But we do whole genome sequencing too. We send, and this relates to the last little icon there too, of sample collection. We send a phlebotomist to your home once a quarter. Now, everybody who's in this program doesn't have to do every aspect of it. If you can't move and you don't want to do the activity tracking that I haven't even talked about yet, you don't have to. We are grateful for every bit of data that you give us. And like TurboTax, we're not going to yell at you if you don't do all of it, right? Some of it wouldn't make sense. But regarding the whole genome sequencing and the sample collection, we send a phlebotomist to your home. We try to keep this as, low burden as possible. It doesn't cost anything. It costs us something, by the way, but it doesn't, nobody's charged to be in this program by any means. And the phlebotomist will come and take your blood. It goes back to TDI. And not only is that how we do our whole genome sequencing, which we partner with the Broad Institute on, but it's how we look for changes in things like neurofilament light. NFL, people have heard about that as a possible blood-based biomarker of ALS. Well, we have the most robust data set around this because we have thousands of people with ALS who are not only showing us how their NFL scores have changed as we send the phlebotomist to their home year after year, but we can then look at it and see how it relates to how your voice has progressed or how your limbs have progressed, right? It's incredibly valuable to have that whole picture like that. So backtracking to activity tracking, those were those clunky looking Fitbit things that Andrea had on in that picture. And, I don't know, Gwen might be wearing one too. There are 4, actually, they're stunning, but you know what? They make for a great conversation piece if you're out in the world wearing those because people ask about them and you get to talk about ALS research. So those are called accelerometers, and they are funky looking Fitbits, wireless devices that you wear on your wrists and your ankles. And we send them to you in a FedEx envelope, and you've got them for 4 days a month. And we send them to you with a return FedEx envelope, and you send them back because we're too cheap to have them for everybody. We download the data, we disinfect them, we clean them. Amy and Michelle saw the office where this, all transpires. And then they go out to the next person. But while you're wearing those accelerometers, a couple of things. We ask people to wear them as much as they can without wanting to, be mad at us for making us wear them. But the more you wear them, the more data we get. But within each of those days that you have them, we ask you to press play on your proprietary web portal where a video will come up of our friend Ken Thompson that we talked about, who was Stephen Haywood's best friend. And he will be showing you a set of kind of exercises that you will do while wearing these accelerometers. They're basically arm raises and leg raises and trunk extensions. That gives us, that time stamps it, right? And it gives us the apples to apples to compare every month. So over the course of time, what happens in your portal is we're giving you all of this data back again, and graphs start to emerge, right? Here's what your progression slope looks like according to your accelerometry and your speech tracking. Here's what your NFL levels are at that point. Let's say, can you see me? I have to get my own rectangle so that I can see myself for a second. Let's say your progression is tracking on a slope like this, right? Then all of a sudden you go into a clinical trial and your progression starts going like this. Get the hell out of that clinical trial, right? Let's say it starts to slow down. It starts to even out. Well, listen, there are plateaus all the time in ALS. And trust me, these graphs aren't as clean and simple as the way I'm making them sound. But for the first time, people living with this disease have objective data on which to base treatment decisions. We know the ALSFRS is subjective, right? Can you bite your shirt? Can you drink through a straw? It all means different things to different people. It's delivered in different ways. But you are getting true objective data. You are able to see your own graph. You print that sucker right out and you bring that into your clinician too, right? Maybe you're changing something else in your protocol. Maybe your sleep habits have changed. Maybe you're trying different supplements. Whatever it is, you can look to see if you see an effect on your trajectory. So it's incredibly valuable to people with ALS. It is incredibly valuable to us. You have now generated, as a group of people living with ALS, 45 terabytes of data. I don't know what that means, but nerds gasp when I say it. So it must be a lot. All right, before I go on to the sharing part of this program, any questions on this part, the data acquisition?
Yes.
Sure, hit me up.
I went through the National Registry data collection process maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
You know, it takes a while. And then, of course, there's blood sample data that's been donated to other trials. Is it possible for us to release that data to the ARC study so it can be pulled together? It's like sort of like sending a web crawler out there.
That is the greatest question in the world and the
Yeah.
most annoying one to answer because the answer is no. But
Okay,
here's
I'm
why.
sorry to annoy you. Let's move on to the next
No,
one.
it's annoying for me to give you an answer that should be yes, and it's
Right.
no.
All
So here's why.
Yeah.
There are different you know, advisory boards, protocols, lawyers involved in every clinical trial in every program. So they cannot share those samples back with anyone else. It's
But
in
those are just rules and regulations. So could we just get an executive order out of the White House and just override all that?
maybe
Okay, all right.
that
Just a
might just
thought.
do it.
Okay, all
However,
right.
the field, just
I-
so you know, I look
Yeah.
forward to the day where I don't have to give an annoying answer.
Right, yeah, okay, understand, yeah.
And I do think that the field is moving towards developing these unique identifiers so that we can use samples from various studies and compare them. Now, one thing we have done to help with this issue is we have worked with Answer ALS to take all of their data and all of our ARC data and put it together in a database called Neuromind so that groups are beginning to pool their data. But what's difficult about it too is different groups collect data in different ways, you know? So you have to have a common denominator in order for them to go into one database and make objective sense to people. But I love that question because it pisses me off every time, Ben. It makes me want to do more about it.
Okay, great.
Thanks for pissing
What,
me off, Ben.
yeah, well, I mean, whatever we can do to help. I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe if I put in a proposal, if I went back to National Registry and say, hey, can you release my input from 3 years ago and send it to so-and-so at ARC?
See what they
come
say.
back with,
See
right?
what happens. I would love it
Okay.
if you did that.
I will.
That'd be
I'll give that
great.
time.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
Yeah.
Okay, now another part. We partnered with a company called Unite Genomics. And we are now, for anyone who is interested in providing their electronic health records as part of the program, we can accept those as well. So again, so many people will say to us, 2 weeks before my symptoms started, I fell on the ice in the driveway. Or I got the COVID vaccine a month before my symptoms started. Could that be what's going on? I had cancer 10 years ago. Could that be related? Well, here's how we start to figure that out. By the way, just so that you know, there is plenty of data to support the fact that COVID vaccines do not have an impact on disease. So, however, the disease of COVID does. So there's that. So we are offering people the opportunity to give us even more data by supplying their electronic health records. We are working with Dr. Danielle Boyce, who has joined ALS TDI from Tufts, to do the omopification, don't I sound smart, of the status. So basically, you've got to figure out a way to extract what's in everybody's electronic health records, which have been collected in a myriad of ways, and get it into an Excel spreadsheet, right? So OMOP is the process of determining what the columns and rows would be on an Excel spreadsheet in which to enter all of the EHR electronic health record data to make it meaningful across the population. But I think this is a really interesting one, and this is like cool, this was never able to be done before. So we are grateful to work with Unite Genomics and Dr. Boyce to be able to get a fuller picture of, like, Gwen, you ain't just your ALS, you're a little bit more than that. So we want to learn from every aspect of people. So what are the goals of the program? We
Carol,
can,
Carol, sorry, I'm being quiet. I'm still eating. So
I'm glad.
I'm always people people make fun of me if there's a lunch call. It's like, yup, Gwen's eating. I mean, a girl's gotta eat.
That girl
Come
has got to
on.
eat.
Come on.
What are you having, Gwen?
Some soup, a little salad, kind of healthy, Care.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. Hey, Carol, actually, I do have something to add other than food. Are we going to chat about the in-home blood collection anymore? Because I've got a shout out to my phlebotomist that TDI contracted for Connecticut.
Yeah.
Honestly and truly, Carol, the one of the, if not the best phlebotomist who has ever poked me. And
Really?
there have been a lot of blood pokes, as you know. So yeah, just a shout out for
Oh, I'll let Alan know. He'll be
yes.
thrilled.
Oh, I've told.
Have you? And do you get
Yes.
the same one every time, Gwen?
Pretty much, yeah, unless he is away or on vacation, but it is his company every time. So
Awesome.
yeah. And for Ben and anyone else in the call who will be signing up for ARC, this is incredibly easy. Carol has heard me say it like dozens of times, but truly, it is the easiest research study that I have ever contributed to. And that is in part due to like seamless operations at TDI, everything from signing up for the program to if you want to give your blood, someone will contact you. You pretty much don't need to do anything. Someone will contact you and set up a phlebotomist, the whole thing. So, yeah, it's really just about signing up, and TDI will take care of the rest.
Thanks, Gwen. And they work hard on it, and they're real life
Yes.
people. So if you just heard me mention Alan a moment ago, Alan Primaseri is the person who runs the ARC program, along with Erin Garrity and
Yes.
Beth Levine. So these are real life people too, just like the pictures in my slides, and you will get to know them. like I said, yes, we are a scientific research institute, but we are also people. And you will laugh on the phone with Alan, and you will come to adore him as the rest of us have,
Yes.
and appreciate his dedication to this disease. So,
Thanks, Carol.
thank you, Gwen. So we want to discover new therapeutic targets, right? Things to aim drugs at, like a bullseye with an arrow. We can do that here because we're looking, for example, we're using a screen called SomaLogic to look at 5,000 proteins in this blood collection work. We can start to look to say, okay, Gwen's a slow progressor. Let's look at her protein levels at such and such a protein. Let's compare them. Again, I'm being very silly here with how casual I'm being with it, but we can look at how those protein levels change across a very large population set. And if we start to see, there was a hope that Rick Bedlack from Duke had recently that a protein called ABPB7, that people with elevated levels of the protein were slower progressors. So what we hoped was, okay, would that be a drug target that we could try to tweak, right, to aim a drug at? So we tested his hypothesis
Up inputs.
in ARC and discovered that unfortunately that data did not hold out over these 45 terabytes of data. But that's okay. Now we know that, right? And we also know that we can look at protein levels like that as we begin to have hypotheses, or other researchers across other programs have hypotheses. We can start to identify drug targets. We can look at digital biomarkers like I talked about with Google, and voice progression, calling in to an 800 number to determine if a drug might work. We can look at blood-based biomarkers, NFL, how does it compare to how you're moving? And then, of course, we're sharing all of this data back with people with ALS. So, here's the pitch. You'll be so empowered. You can do it from home. You can access your data, all the stuff I said. But the last one is important because there's a whole other part of this program, and that's the ARC Data Commons. This is where we anonymize all of your data and share it with researchers across the globe so that they can help advance their own programs. So if you are an academic researcher or a nonprofit researcher, or a clinical researcher, all of this data is available by signing a data use agreement, and it is all free. We would love to be the ones to invent every single solitary drug for ALS, but it's not going to happen. It is our job to make sure that everybody moves their programs faster. So researchers can go in, they can drill down on every bit of the data. They can say, I'm looking for the data for people living with C9orf72 in Bangladesh who have had ALS for 2 years. And they can pull up all of their whole genome sequencing. They can look at their NFL levels, whatever it is. And papers have already been published. I realize I'm over time, so now I'm talking fast, on the use of this data. So it's not just TDI that is moving things forward because of it. Mass General, Harvard, Duke, people are leveraging this data in their own programs and sharing that information with the rest of the research community. Here's a slide that clearly you can see I made 2.5 seconds before I came on. Thank you, Michelle, for that prompt. But here you can snap that if you want to go straight to the enrollment page for ARC. And thank you to everyone on this call and on every freaking call on the planet who has contributed to this, because this is amazing. We can't do it without you. Thank you.
Right.
And there some of us are.
Wow.
That's Alan, a smaller guy in the back. He runs the ARC program, so you'll get to know him, and Beth, who works with him. So you'll get to know some of these people. And there's Anna again.
All right.
Stop sharing. I'm sorry I went over. Any question?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Carol. That was a
Yes, thank you so
great
much.
overview.
Oh, I'm glad.
So, Stephen's sister-in-law, Melissa, was her maiden name Gates? Or not her married name? Was her married name Gates?
Oh, no, Stephen
Or-
Haywood's
Or is it Melinda? Melinda Gates, right?
Melinda.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was it Gates.
right. Yeah,
Wait,
okay.
No, you know what? As a matter of fact, want to hear something interesting? This is a story for another day to whet your appetite, Ben. Melinda's name is Melinda Pavlotta. She put herself through